What's up, guys? Oh, the stupid thing is down. this is my second take. I did one yesterday, right? But I had a really bad. I took bad cold medicine that just made my nose run like crazy, so I could barely talk. So I decided to do a take two. So this is take two of my Tetsujin 28 review. I'm reviewing the 2004 TV series, which is basically like a reimagining of the original series. Which, for people who don't know, Tetsujin 28, which means Iron Man number 28, was a manga series by Mitsuteru Yokoyama, who created Giant Robo. This is like the guy who invented pretty much the Mecha series, right? This guy was even before Go Nagai, right? Go Nagai was like another 10 years before this guy was, before this guy. Go Nagai was dead back then. Yeah. So yeah, today I'm reviewing Tetsujin 28, which is the 2004 Mecha Mystery Adventure series. It had 26 episodes, made by Palm Studio, with music by Kira Seiju, and written and directed by Yasuhiro Imagawa, who worked on such anime as G Gundam. He wrote and directed the 90s Giant Robo series, and he worked on the 90s Berserk show, right? And he even worked on Fist of the Blue Sky, which was Fist of North Star spinoff. Though that show was I think that was that the CGI one, the Fist of the Blue Sky. I don't know. There was a CGI Fist of the Blue Sky show, which if you don't mind CGI, it wasn't that bad, right? Yeah. So the show takes place 10 years after World War II, right? It's like a post-war Japan anime that's about a 10-year-old boy named Shotaro Kaneda, who is the boy detective, right? Who was the son of Professor Kaneda, whose parents both died during the war, right? And he was raised by his dad's associates, Chief Otsuka, right? And Chief Otsuka and his assistant, Professor Shikishima, who now runs Shikishima Heavy Industries, who also develops giant robots in the show, right? The show starts off with our character Shotaro Kaneda chasing the Murasame brothers, right? Which is run by Kenji Murasame, who's voiced by Brian Drummond, who's one of my favorite voice actors from Ocean Group, who you might recognize from animes such as Death Note. He was Sex Marquise, right, in Gundam Wing, which the narrator of this show is actually the same narrator as from Gundam Wing, which he also voices Shikishima's wife in the show, right? So the show starts off with Shotaro chasing the Murasame brothers when a giant rocket launches itself towards Tokyo, and inside the giant missile, it contains the giant robot Tetsujin 28, which goes berserk because it just goes on autopilot, right? And the first 3 episodes, our characters stopping Tetsujin 28 during its rampage and getting control of the control box, which how a lot of the first giant robots were operated in the Mecha series, where you had a character, usually a young boy, piloting a giant robot outside the giant robot, usually with a control console, like portable control console, or in Giant Robo, he had like a wristwatch that where he would control the robot, I think by voice, right? So yeah, the show is mostly Shoto Kaneda piloting Tetsujin 28 while trying to solve cases, usually involving past associates of Professor Kaneda, right? Like Dr. Franken, who is another robot, who's another robot inventor who created the Black Ox, which is like the own, besides from Tetsujin 28 and the Black Ox, most of the other robot designs in this show look goofy as hell, especially since a lot of them have hairstyles. They just look goofy as hell. Like the only giant robots in this show that actually look good, in my opinion, is Black Ox and Tetsujin 28. And I would say I prefer Black Ox probably better than Tetsujin 28. Though Black Ox can't fly like Tetsujin 28. Right, which that's another thing with the show is the giant robots basically don't have weapons. They just walk and like beat the crap out of each other. Some of them do have weapons. Like there's one of the robots, I forget what it's called. I think it was called. It had like, was it Kelly? Not Kelly. It was like it had like a person's name, and it would shoot like acid, right? And like you had another robot that would shoot electricity. But aside from that, the robots don't really have special attacks. So yeah, it's mostly our character fighting, solving mysteries while fighting giant robots. There was one episode where he fought a cyborg. There's one episode where he fought like a Frankenstein monster. Because Dr. Franken, besides from being a biologist, was also created his own giant robot. The other enemies they fight is crime syndicates. Like one of the villains in this show called Frill Suspense. A lot of the foreigner characters in this show have weird names. Like Frill Suspense, who looks like he's like a knockoff of the Penguin, right? Who's even like a mob boss, right? Which the Penguin kind of was. You had like a Big Fire, Professor Big Fire, Core Form, like a lot of the bad guys in this show, the foreigners have like weird names, right? Yeah, that's just how it is. Yeah, one of the bad guys in this show, there's one episode where that was super depressing, right? Was they had to fight an alien from the outer space, which was kind of like the Blob, which it would suck the moisture out of people, and it would like assume it would transform into giant shapes, right? And that episode was super depressing because that's another thing with the show. Yeah, you watch the show thinking it's gonna be a fun adventure mystery show, but because of the setting, the show can be really depressing at times. Like those episodes were about like depressed zookeeper who was accused of murder when it was obviously the Blob monster, right? And they go into his backstory, how during the war he wasn't like physically fit to fight, so he got criticized for that, and he was working at the zoo, and because of the air raids, he was forced to euthanize all the animals because they couldn't risk the animals getting freed, like their cages getting destroyed by the bombs, right? Which you would think they would probably be, if their cages were, I don't know, you would think if bombs dropped on their cages, they would probably would die, but I don't know, just in case they had to kill them because they couldn't risk like lions and tigers, bears getting free, killing people, right? So he had to kill them. So that was like a super depressing episode. Oh my god. There's also an episode where they fight an AI robot, and the AI robot's like a kid, right? So that episode was also super depressing. Yeah, but the final stretch of the show is them fighting this fighting this organization called the PX organization. That's also uh, uh, multi international economic group that's trying to take over Japan's industry. So like the show does have some politics, right? Some politics, and what I really liked about the show is that it really reflected the times, uh, reflected the times, because this show, the manga did start in the same time period, which was 10 years after the war. So instead of like the climax of the show is that our characters trying to save the world, even though there is some of that. But it's mostly all them trying to like save. It was more of a domestic issue where they're trying to save Japan from economic turmoil, right? They want, because Japan, the first couple of years after World War II was like pretty much the Great Depression of Japan, right? Very hard times, right? So like our characters had to stop that. Right, so I'm just going with my likes and dislikes. I like the aesthetic of the show as this retro aesthetic, right? The action was good. I like the characters, the humor. The writing was for the most part odd, and like the music choices, because the show was based off an older show. They didn't put modern music. They put like music from the 50s and 60s, right? I also forgot to mention this show. There's the older show, the original Tetsujin 28 show was called Gigantor in the West. So if you want to watch the original Tetsujin 28 show, you probably have to look up Gigantor, right? I think it's even on YouTube. At least it was when I first watched it like a year ago. Now I'm going to go in my dislikes. Oh boy, the show is depressing. Like I said, the show can be really depressing, right? I liked the fact, I liked the show that the show was pretty much in arcs, not episodic, though there were some episodic episodes. But like I said, besides from Black Ox and Tetsujin 28, the other robots looked like crap. And I did not like the fact that they mass-produced Black Ox. So, the only other cool robot in the show, they turned Black Ox into a jobber, right? Which is like, fuck, man. I hated that. And, they couldn't do a thing where they changed the color scheme a bit, so you could tell the original Black Ox from the different Black Oxes. That sucks. So they turned Black Ox into a jobber. And then there's the fact, they mass produced Black Oxes to be used at construction sites. Why did the police, who are always relying on Shotaro with Tetsujin 28 to deal with the giant robot attacks, why did the police department or the military buy giant robots so they could deal with it as well? And I know, if you watch the show, you know the people who are mass producing the Black Oxes, right, for evil or whatever, even though there wasn't their intention, right? They're also the ones selling it to the government, right? Okay, but still, would have been nice, okay? Would have been that. I just thought that was a plot hole, that the police and the military would have their own Black Oxes, right? I didn't like some of the show. Sometimes the show can be really repetitive with its melodrama BS bullshit, where Shotaro is all hung up on using Tetsujin 28 because he's a weapon of mass destruction, right? There's a lot of that. There's the thing where a character doesn't want to use guns, but uses guns at the end, right? After getting the okay from a ghost, the ghost of his brother, which ghosts randomly show up at the end of the show. The ghosts of characters show up. There's fake character deaths. That's always annoying. One was okay, but the second one, that was kind of dumb, right? Yeah, that was annoying. But overall, like, what was my other? I had one other complaint. Oh my god, I can't remember now. Oh yeah, Big Fire, one of the villains at the end of this episode, who was introduced that he was like a foreigner. You find out at the end of the show, this is kind of a spoiler, that he wants to make Japan like it was pre World War II. He didn't like that Japan after the war basically became like a carbon copy of the people that defeated them, like the victors, right? He didn't like that, Japan became Americanized, so he wants to make Japan back to the way it was. Thought that was a little weird for a character we were introduced that's supposed to be like a foreigner, right? That he wants Japan to be the way it was back in the day, like, which is the same plot as Gasuraki. If you ever seen that show, which was another weird. It was like a weird Ava ripoff by the guy who made Armor Trooper Votabs, it was probably better than like a lot of the other Ava ripoffs, but yeah. Though, like, yeah, that was a weird show. I'm not gonna spoil it, but yeah. Another problem I have with the show, and like it kind of makes sense considering this takes place in post-war Japan, but pretty much all the foreigner characters turned out to be bad guys in this show. There was like one foreigner character who was a reoccurring character, but it turns out, spoiler alert, turns out he was another character in disguise. Because a character fakes his death during the show, right? So it's like, fuck, man. Like, the one good Gaijin, they make him they took that away from us. All the foreigners are bad people in the show. The show has some xenophobia, okay? But keep in mind, the show is based off a manga from, like, 1950s Japan, so it kind of makes sense, okay? So besides from all my problems, I think the show is still a great show, and I would give it, like, it's still a good show. It's not great, but it's like, it's a good show. I would say 7 out of 10. The show is available on Tubi, but if you want to support the official release, I think Discotech Media put out a Blu-ray, right? They put out a Blu-ray for the movie, which I did a review of last year, so check that out. My next TV show I'm going to review is Ultraman Orb. But if this video gets at least 20 something views, we'll do a poll, and you guys will get to pick the next anime I review after I watch Ultraman Orb. Peace.